I've created a highly popular video on the rise and fall of the Republican Party, so in fairness, it's only right to discuss the Democratic Party, which I'll do in 2 parts. This one, What the Democratic Party Gets Wrong, will be followed up by What the Democratic Party Gets Right, coming soon. The story of the Democratic Party is as layered as the American workforce it once represented so fervently. From its deep-seated origins as a champion of labor rights and the economically disadvantaged, the party has seen a profound evolution in both direction and loyalty. While under the Biden-Harris administration, recent moves show an earnest attempt to recenter the party's focus on working-class interests, the journey has been turbulent, marked by alliances that have reshaped its image and priorities. Some progress has been made, but this revival is marred by complex missteps, particularly in foreign policy, that cast shadows on the party's credibility. In this analysis, we'll trace how the Democratic Party, which once symbolized labor empowerment and the plight of the working class, shifted toward a corporate-friendly stance during the Clinton years. With policies like NAFTA and financial deregulation, the party moved sharply toward economic centrism, sparking significant consequences that alienated some of its most loyal supporters. Today, with Biden and Harris at the helm, a different agenda emerges, one that seeks to redress these grievances and bring labor issues back to the fore. However, unresolved accountability in global conflicts, particularly in Ukraine and Gaza, presents ethical questions that haunt the Democratic Party's narrative as a defender of democracy and human rights. In this journey through the party's transformation, we'll examine not only the domestic shifts but the international ripple effects of these decisions, how they affect America's image, and its role in a world yearning for principled leadership. Let's dive into how Clinton's embrace of big business changed everything, setting the stage for both domestic disillusionment and a global balancing act that continues to this day. To understand the Democratic Party's shift away from its labor roots, we must step back to the early 1990s. For much of the 20th century, Democrats were known as the Party of Labor, a force for working-class Americans. They stood shoulder to shoulder with unions, supported collective bargaining rights, and fought against income inequality. But as the global economy shifted, so did the political strategies within the Democratic Party. Enter Bill Clinton, a charismatic centrist with a bold new direction. Clinton's strategy was clear: to position the Democratic Party as business-friendly, breaking away from its traditional labor-first image. This shift was pragmatic, aimed at broadening the party's appeal by attracting moderate and affluent voters who had begun to favor the Republicans. Clinton introduced economic policies that prioritized market-driven solutions and corporate partnerships. This move, though beneficial for some, meant cutting old ties with unions and the working class, especially with legislation like the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. NAFTA, for example, was touted as a leap toward modernizing trade with Canada and Mexico. Yet, it unleashed a wave of outsourcing that hit American factory towns like a wrecking ball, dismantling jobs that once symbolized the Democratic Party's commitment to working families. At the same time, financial deregulation, such as the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, paved the way for banking giants to consolidate power, laying the groundwork for the 2008 financial crisis. These decisions, far from revitalizing the party's traditional base, fostered resentment as entire industries shifted overseas, wages stagnated, and income inequality surged. This alignment with corporate interests left a deep mark, turning the Democratic Party's image into one of elitism, where economic centrism overshadowed the welfare of the common worker. The Clinton era, though hailed by some as a time of economic growth, left a rift in the party that would only deepen in the coming decades. And as we'll see, this pivot would come back to haunt the Democrats, as working-class Americans began looking elsewhere for a voice fueling a new brand of economic populism on the political right. The Clinton era may have ushered in short-term economic gains, but its long-term effects on the Democratic Party's relationship with the working class were profound. As corporate alliances flourished, working Americans, once the bedrock of Democratic support, began to feel a disillusioning distance. Jobs disappeared, particularly in manufacturing and other blue-collar industries, as outsourcing sent employment opportunities across borders. Wages stagnated, union influence waned, and with each passing year, the party of the people seemed to drift further from the everyday lives of its core voters. This transformation left many working-class Americans feeling abandoned and betrayed. As trust eroded, a new perception took hold. Democrats were now the party of elites, a group more interested in Wall Street and Silicon Valley than the factory floors and main streets of Middle America. The policies that prioritized corporate partnerships over worker protections created a growing divide, one that other political forces were all too eager to exploit. Sensing this gap, Republican candidates and strategists began to capitalize on the disaffection spreading among working-class voters. Donald Trump's 2016 campaign harnessed this disenchantment, positioning himself as the voice of forgotten Americans and framing the Democrats as out-of-touch elites. His economic populism and fiery rhetoric promised a reversal of the very trade deals and corporate-driven policies that had disenfranchised so many. This shift was a wake-up call, revealing that the very workers who once powered Democratic victories were now looking to the right, drawn by promises to restore their industries and put America first. This realignment within the working class wasn't just a political shift. It marked a deep-rooted change in American identity. Disenfranchised workers, who felt the effects of globalization but saw few of its benefits, began to see the Democratic Party as part of the problem. And while Democrats have recently begun efforts to reclaim their labor-focused legacy, the damage done during the Clinton years left lasting scars on the party's image and an opening for an economic populism that continues to challenge them today. In the wake of these historical shifts, the Biden-Harris administration took office with a clear objective: to bridge the rift between the Democratic Party and America's working and middle classes. Faced with the economic wounds from corporate-centric policies, the administration moved quickly to implement changes aimed at putting people, not profits, back at the center of its agenda. With landmark legislation and strategic reversals of Clinton-era policies, Biden and Harris have undertaken the challenge of reconnecting with the very communities that had once felt overlooked. One of the most significant steps has been the administration's commitment to pro-worker legislation. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, for instance, not only addresses America's aging infrastructure, but also promises to create millions of jobs that provide fair wages and benefits. These are not just jobs. They are symbols of a renewed commitment to labor reminiscent of New Deal-era projects that linked the Democratic Party with workers' rights and opportunity. Likewise, the climate-focused Inflation Reduction Act takes on both job creation and environmental stewardship, providing funding for green energy projects that aim to build a sustainable economy while prioritizing American labor. These policies are resonating. Biden and Harris's emphasis on union empowerment and support for manufacturing jobs has already drawn positive responses from labor leaders, community organizations, and working Americans who see the administration as advocating for their livelihoods and futures. In fact, recent polling indicates a modest but measurable uptick in union approval of Democratic leadership, reflecting a growing belief that the party may indeed be turning back toward its labor roots. But despite these gains, challenges remain. While domestic policies are rebuilding trust on American soil, the administration's foreign policy choices, particularly regarding Ukraine and Gaza, pose significant ethical and political dilemmas that threaten to overshadow this progress. Biden's pro-labor message at home is compelling, but how will it be reconciled with a global strategy that many argue lacks the same human-centered values? In the next section, we'll examine these foreign policy complexities and the pressures they place on an administration attempting to balance domestic priorities with global responsibilities. While the Biden-Harris administration has made strides in reconnecting with the working class domestically, its foreign policy has been a balancing act fraught with difficult decisions, particularly in areas of global conflict. As a self-styled defender of democracy on the world stage, the Democratic Party faces both the responsibility and the scrutiny that come with maintaining international alliances, ensuring human rights, and supporting democratic movements. However, recent conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza reveal the ethical complexities and inconsistencies in these efforts, complicating the party's message of principled, people-centered governance. The Biden administration faces rising criticism for its approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict, especially its response to the recent escalation in Gaza. While the administration publicly supports a two-state solution, it has maintained a complex alliance with Israel, even as international criticism mounts over alleged human rights abuses in Gaza. Progressive voices within the Democratic Party have increasingly called for stronger accountability measures against the Netanyahu administration, urging Biden to hold Israel to higher humanitarian standards. Yet the administration's reluctance to impose consequences on Netanyahu's policies has led to frustration, particularly among progressives in the Arab American community who see the lack of accountability as contradictory to the party's pro-human rights stance. This diplomatic tightrope walk between supporting long-standing allies and upholding a universal commitment to human rights has proven difficult to navigate. While Biden's foreign policy team aims to preserve global alliances, the perception of double standards in U.S. commitments, strong support for democracy in Ukraine, contrasted with a cautious approach to accountability in Gaza has cast doubt on the consistency of American leadership. Critics argue that the administration's messaging on democracy and human rights seems selective, weakening its moral standing and fueling doubts about the United States as a reliable global leader. As the Biden-Harris administration navigates these international conflicts, the stakes are high, both for the Democratic Party's image and for America's influence on the global stage. The question remains, can the party reconcile its commitment to global stability with a genuine dedication to human rights? And as Biden's administration continues to walk this diplomatic line, will these foreign policy decisions undermine or bolster the Democrats' vision of a people-centered approach? In the next section, we'll explore the challenges and criticisms Biden faces on both domestic and foreign fronts as he attempts to align policy with principle. As the Biden-Harris administration strives to uphold its commitment to working-class Americans while maintaining a strong international presence, it faces a growing list of critiques, particularly from within its own progressive base. For all its efforts to restore the Democratic Party's image as a champion of labor and social justice, the administration remains constrained by the ongoing influence of corporate donors and the need for political pragmatism in foreign policy. These dual pressures create a tension that complicates Biden's vision for an ethically grounded, people-first agenda. Domestically, the administration's labor and climate initiatives have received praise, but progressives argue that much of the Democratic platform's transformative potential remains untapped. Key reforms such as the PRO Act, which would strengthen union protections, and significant health care expansion are stalled in Congress. Additionally, despite efforts to tackle income inequality, major tax reform targeting the wealthiest Americans and large corporations has faced significant obstacles. These incomplete reforms leave room for skepticism, as critics wonder whether Biden's policies are bold enough to counter the systemic issues ingrained in the economy. Many worry that, without decisive action, the administration's impact may feel more like a surface correction than a profound shift. Foreign policy, too, presents its own challenges. The administration's efforts to protect democracy abroad are seen as incomplete, even hypocritical, by those who point out America's strong support for certain allies, like Israel, despite allegations of human rights abuses. Progressive Democrats have called for greater transparency and accountability, demanding that foreign aid be tied to humanitarian standards, but such measures are difficult to implement without alienating key international partners. These frustrations resonate with younger and more left-leaning voters, who are increasingly skeptical of the U.S. government's foreign interventions. This faction within the party calls for a redefined approach that aligns more closely with the human rights and justice-centered rhetoric promoted by Biden and Harris. Adding to these critiques is the persistent influence of corporate donors on the Democratic Party's agenda. While Biden has worked to lessen the sway of big business, corporate interests continue to affect decision-making processes in areas such as healthcare, finance, and environmental regulation. This influence reinforces doubts among voters who seek a Democratic Party truly free from the pressures of lobbying and vested interests. As Biden's administration nears the midpoint of its term, the challenge becomes clear: how to deliver on a bold vision for a fairer, more humane America while navigating the limitations posed by entrenched interests and political realities. These obstacles, both domestic and international, point to a fundamental question for the Biden-Harris administration. Can the Democratic Party authentically reclaim its people-centered mission in a political landscape shaped by power, profit, and influence? In the conclusion, we'll reflect on the importance of this mission and explore what it will take for Democrats to create a future that fully embodies the values of justice, equity, and democracy. The Democratic Party's journey from a bastion of labor rights to an era of corporate alliances and back toward the people has been marked by moments of progress and setbacks alike. Under Biden and Harris, the party has taken meaningful steps to reconnect with working Americans, reviving labor rights and infrastructure development while addressing climate challenges. However, the contradictions between domestic ambitions and global actions highlight a recurring tension within the party, balancing ethical values with the pragmatism required in geopolitics and governance. Looking forward, the Democratic Party faces a critical test. To truly honor its mission of justice and democracy, it must not only legislate but embody these principles at every level, from local communities to global arenas. This will require confronting the influence of corporate donors, advancing stalled reforms in areas such as labor protections and tax justice, and embracing a foreign policy that unequivocally prioritizes human rights. The challenge is immense, but so is the opportunity to redefine the party for the modern age, aligning with the ideals of equity and accountability that resonate with a new generation of voters. The Democratic Party is reclaiming its legacy as the party of the people, championing democratic values, justice, and equality, not just in words, but in every policy and alliance. The lessons of the past have shown the perils of drifting from these core principles. Now, with a renewed focus on people-centered governance, there is an opportunity to shape a future that genuinely reflects the party's mission. At Renaissance Spirit, we believe in the power of knowledge and action. The legacy of the Renaissance taught us that progress begins with understanding, with a commitment to exploring and improving the world for all humanity. As we face the challenges of our time, let us bring that same spirit to our lives and actions. Subscribe, share, and join our discussions as we dive into topics that matter, from politics and society to history and culture, from the echoes of the past to the possibilities of tomorrow. If you're passionate about building a better world and exploring life's big questions, Renaissance Spirit is here for you. If you're intrigued by these ideas and want to explore topics that challenge and inspire, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. I also recommend watching The Rise and Fall of the Republican Party, as well as our video, What the Democratic Party Gets Right, coming soon, as well as our other videos on politics, civics, and civic virtue. Join us on a journey through the liberal arts and sciences, from the timeless lessons of ancient Rome to the modern-day issues shaping our world. Comment below to share your thoughts and let us know what you'd like to see next. Before you go, take our Renaissance Spirit quiz to discover if this journey of learning and growth resonates with you. Vive Renaissance Spiritus! Remember, history hasn't died, only our understanding of it. Because history, after all, has not faded away. It lives on in our actions, our choices, and our enduring pursuit of truth and justice.